We the omnipotent fermentations of time, taking ancient dreams and technological prime. Weave the stories of the old right through the soul, and so they told and told until they start to transform. They're born again into the next era with the modern flair, but the message still bears a one in the many, many in the one. So come on in, cause you're most welcome to the temple of earth, the sun and the moon. Reclaim your power, it's the place we commune, a place for the mind, the body and soul, to seed it through the ages, become infrangible. Welcome to the Wild Temple. Welcome to the Wild Temple.
Hello there, my name is Brooke Shannon Sullivan, and I'm the director of the Wild Temple School of Yoga and Herbal Wisdom and this Wild Temple podcast. Part of my mission is that I guide yoga and wellness professionals, spirit-led change makers, practical mystics, and aspiring leaders who especially love nature into self-mastery and soul purpose to have greater impact in the world. Why? Because the world needs us, and for those listening, needs you. I do this through a methodology of twilight alchemy, which comes from a really ancient system of Tantra, and the tools of Tantra, yoga, and herbal wisdom, which I call sacred technologies. If you're enjoying this podcast, we'd love it if you would help us spread the word by sharing, by giving some stars or a review, and even to correspond with us. We love receiving emails if you want us to cover any topics or you're inspired by what I've talked about or our guests have talked about. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for your time. Let's stay connected. Enjoy today. I love it when someone says, I don't really care about the format. Let's just flow. Thank you so much. And I want to say welcome all of you Wild Temple podcast listeners. I wanted to start with just the title. I've named this one, The Sage Rebellion with Yogini Elder, Jean Mazzei. And I want to give a little backstory with throughout history, the sage, so let's talk about the sage for a moment, has stood as a beacon of clarity, wisdom, and unraveling or unwavering insight, a force beyond the sway of societal currents. Sages were the ones that rulers sought for counsel, the ones who lived in deep alignment with something ancient that supported the commoners, but also they were tapped into what are more the mysterious realms unshaken by the tides of the modern world. And so because of this, the sage for me has always been the rebel. And so here at the Wild Temple, for those of you who may be listening and have been listening for a long time or students of the Wild Temple, the sage archetype is really strong and it's a central pillar of our work. It's an embodiment of the wisdom cultivated through experience, through practice, and through profound self-inquiry. And in our Himalayan tantric tradition, which Jean is also a part of with me, the sage is not a title granted necessarily, but it's a state of being that one arrives at when equipped with the right tools, the right guidance, and a willingness to see beyond the illusion. So my guest, Jean Mazzei, and you can find her at flyingvenus.com. I love that website, by the way, is a true to me embodiment of the modern sage. Not because of a title or an external distinction, but because of her clarity, her maturity of insight, and her ability to guide others into deeper realms of both body and consciousness in a really unique way. And this is through listening, this is through paying attention, and it's through not having to follow a format or template of anyone else. So, with decades of experience in yoga, tantra, and deep personal exploration, Jean holds the seat of an elder, one who lights the way for others, not by prescribing a path necessarily, but by illuminating the inner landscapes that lead to true wisdom. So, today in our conversation, we'll dive into what it really means to walk this path of wisdom in a world that often discourages it, especially as women, and how resistance and rebellion can serve as tools for transformation, and the ways in which Jean has carved her own path as a teacher, practitioner, and guide. So, Jean, I'm so grateful to have you here. Welcome.
I'm so thrilled to be here and honored. Thank you, Brooke, for having me here at the Wild Temple.
Yeah.
Yay!
So, just so we know where you're connecting to me from. So where are you living right now? What's going on with the landscape in this moment of time?
Well, in this moment of time, I'm living in Jacksonville, Oregon, which is a small town in Southern Oregon. We have like maybe 2 to 3 thousand people in my little town.
Mm.
So I love living in a small community. I used to live in Mount Shasta, which was also a small town. And so I do have this resonance with kind of one of the things that small towns brings, which is sort of like the people know you and you know everybody. You don't know everybody, but you know a lot of people, and there's a familiarity there, and then there's less of a need to drive everywhere for me, and I've really created a place where I can walk most places, which I love. I love the Four Seasons here, so I get to feel more of my in tuneness with nature.
Mm.
When I lived in San Francisco for 20 years, it was one season. It was the season of get it done, and it was the season of everything's so crushingly beautiful. We have to go do something, whether we're working or we're going and playing. So there was no snow day or rain day or where you get to stay inside and drink warm tea with like an excuse because it's the weather, you know. It's just like, let's go do it all the time. And which was awesome until I started to feel its toll on my nervous system. And I mean, I do a lot of practices and I believe in a lot of my way of being in the world doesn't mean like it was depleting me because I can, I could do it. But then I thought the experiment was, what would my life be like and what would my nervous system be like if I didn't tax it in that way?
Mm.
And I wanted to see how would things be different for me? How would I see the world differently? How would I be in my body differently without having to have that extra part of energy to stay steady and present
Mm.
in a lot of activity? So that was my experiment. And it's working for me at this stage in my life. So yeah.
I love that. I love that awareness. I love even the awareness of the crushing beauty that pulls you to do so much. And yeah, and our overwhelm can often be from excitement. It's not just from the demand of, survival, for example. So,
Yeah.
Jean, I think we're already kind of touching into it. So it feels really like a beautiful segue. We love to also talk about Dharma here at the Wild Temple and what this means and your particular journey of Dharma. So, with your journey into yoga specifically, spanning for decades, and how it deeply weaves into the fabric of your life and work, can you share a little bit about your own Dharmic journey, what led you to yoga, and what keeps you devoted to this path?
Excellent question, Brooke. Glad to go there. Well, I came to yoga in a very interesting way, pretty, I guess, non-traditional. Go shocker. Um, when I was in eighth grade, my social studies teacher, Mr. Dwight, gave me this book called Eve Diskin's book for yoga on yoga for beauty and health. And he said, "Here, I think you should do this." I don't know why, out of the blue, my social studies teacher gives me this book on yoga. I don't know why I opened it, read it, and did the morning and afternoon practices every day, like until I found my first actual physical teacher, which was when I was like 22 years old.
Oh my
So I
goodness.
did the morning and afternoon practices because I was just disciplined that way. I think it provided a structure for me. Looking back now with clarity, I think it provided a structure for me in a household that didn't have a lot of clear boundaries. So I think that gave me a place to go. And then I'm thinking like, wow, what would my life be like if I hadn't done that? I don't know. So I did that, not thinking I was doing yoga or anything. I was just wanting to like my body better, and it was a thing I was doing, and I knew there was something else. I always had a connection with the divine. I was raised Catholic, and I was very Catholic, but kind of like modern Catholic back in the day, where I'd go to the youth group and we sort of like redo these rock masses and all this kind of stuff. So I was but spirituality was more about a spiritual thing, not following Catholicism per se. But that was the frame I was in. That was my container. So I played in there as big as I could. And so the divine, there was no question about divine for me. I remember having nights of when I would prayer or quote meditate, I would pretend to meditate and, do things like that. And I remember a really clear sense of divinity. So that was never a question for me. But the container has shifted, and like what that means for me has shifted. So then got my first teacher when I was in my 20s. I was with a dance company, and I figured I needed to get more flexible because I was late to dance, formal dance. And I was in a company with women that were 5'10" and 5'11" with legs that went up to here. And I was 5 feet tall, and I had to look as big as them on stage. So I thought, well, yeah, yoga's going to help my flexibility. So I went to this class, which was through a community center once a week. That was how we did it back in the Midwest. All right. So my mom thought I was in a cult because I was doing yoga. So whatever. There was that also. We're talking like back in the 70s. All right. So this is like in the Midwest. And then in the Midwest still, I would do this community, this adult learning class, and this old guy, he's in his 70s. Dr. Albert Franklin was my first teacher. And his classes were, I've always wondered what the lineage was because I wasn't even aware of lineage at that time. I think it was Desikachar when I look back and look at some stuff. But we did pranayama every time, alternate nostril breathing with the ratios. And it was like a list of 10 poses that we did. And then this was before vinyasa in my world. So this was all, and even when I was doing the Eve Diskin stuff, it was like, how long can you hold the pose? How many breaths? So it was all about how slow can you go and how long can you hold it and how long can you make your breath in and out. So that was yoga to me. Fast forward to, moving on to more modern day. And the first time I went to a vinyasa flow class, I go, what is this? I was like, what? So it was fun because it was dancey. And then I just figured I needed to learn more about the time. So that's sort of my yoga journey. Became a yoga teacher. But I don't think yoga was my dharma. My dharma, because I also met a spiritual teacher in there and spiritual teachers and from different ilks. My dharma is to, reflect the God that I am and be that mirror. And also to be a presence that provides a space for people to wake up to who they really are and to really understand at a very deep level, like what's possible for them in their way of seeing the world and of seeing themselves. So some of my pillars have been non-judgment, which I learned from one of my huge teachers, Dennis Adams. Also self-love, which was also through all the teachers, but Dennis taught that. But I really adopted that as a way of, for me, that's been a really deep path. As a young adolescent growing up in the Twiggy era, where where you could never be too thin, and just my particular upbringing, I really hated my body, and it was a source of constant pain for me because I just didn't look like what I thought was beautiful. And because I took it out on my physical body, I know it was more than that, but now I know, but then it was really about attacking my physical appearance and my physicalness. I didn't like being in this body. I don't think I liked being in a body, period. And I didn't know that then, but now I look back and I think that could have been my story.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my journey for self-love has been big and deep, and to really love myself, not to just fake love myself and not to give it lip service. And that took me into the whole path of unconditional love. Like, what is that to love myself no matter what? Whether I eat that whole pan of brownies or I don't, can I still love myself the same? So getting into the sort of rebellion and resistance piece, when people say living your best life, I really resist that. Like, I'm already living my best life. I wouldn't deliberately not live my best life. If I could have made a different choice in any moment, I would have made it. And I don't care what I know. We make the choice we make in the moment, given our capacity, given what we can actually do in the moment, not what we think we want to be able to do. And we make that like this pillar of something that is we aspire to. Well, maybe aspire to be where you are right now and see what that feels like. What would it feel like to just be where you are right now without
Mm.
comparing it to some ideal thing?
Which is so hard for, I know a lot of listeners are dancers. A lot of listeners have relationship to food that doesn't feel right, doesn't feel aligned or authentic or upholds their wholeness. And everything that you share, Jean, I love so much of what you shared. I love just to parcel some things out. One being, I I'm really grateful to all of what seems to be like kind of this like masculine structural energy of here is something called yoga. You know, you get your sociology teacher that shared it with you very young, and then you get this book, and then your first actual physical in-person teacher is another male figure, and then you have that coupled with at home a very patriarchal religion as Catholicism, but you felt that undertone, the undercurrent of it being spirit, and how you even spoken to all of this has led you into yoga, but not necessarily yoga as dharma, but the dharma being this awakening to the divinity within you and helping to awaken others to the fact that they are divine. And I love that so much, especially in light of I was also raised classical ballerina, had all kinds of digestive issues, and I think it was because of family upbringing, a lot of like really kind of toxic family homes and lifestyles, but that juxtaposition made my mind attack my body and never feel like my 5'2" self. Also, that I was tall enough, fit enough. I could do the jumps. They always put me in the male roles in ballet, you know, but I was never like a prima donna, you know, and so we try as adolescents, and I would say even the adolescent that's wounded inside of us that still has yet to be healed, and yet we know all these things and we're still battling it like deep down in the subconscious that we don't have to fit ourselves in the box. We can't fit ourselves in the box because there really is no box. There's not one uniform box. So to do it a little differently is to find your box, you know, and then find that from this what feels to be like divine matched with the structure to get there. And yeah, I that's kind of what I'm gathering from what you shared. And I'm curious if there's, before we move on, I want to talk a little more about Dharma, what this means for you. Again, it's just kind of unpacking this term, but for people listening now who do have poor relationships with their body and their food, is there any kind of practice or takeaway that you could give them? Any insight now besides what you've just shared, which is lovely?
Yeah. I would say, I mean, first of all, do whatever you need to do. Okay. Don't judge yourself for whatever you need to do to get you through the day. Just do that for one thing. Just like take it all the way to low hanging fruit. If you got to get through the day by saying, I'm not going to eat carrots or I'm going to eat blah, 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 whatever kind of structure you need for your day, do it because that's the one that's holding you right now. So just eliminate anything that you're doing as wrong. Okay. So start there. And then it would get to the point where, I mean, you're up and down, you're like dieting, you're not dieting, you're dieting, you're binging, you're all those things that one might do when one is struggling to attain some ideal that doesn't exist in your body in that moment, or maybe will ever exist, is to say, what would I rather do right now? What would I, not like the choice you're making, but how do I feel about my choice? And then is it worth, is it important that I beat myself up right now? Because some people feel that it is because they think if they don't beat themselves up, they're going to keep doing it. Like we can discipline a dog by beating it into submission. Well, are we beating that dog of us into submission? And how does that work out? And how's it been working? And I'm thinking if you're not really happy with yourself, probably not working out that well. So this beating ourselves up into submission, uh, a way of doing it may, maybe at some point you might feel safe enough to say, what if I just loved myself then? Like, is it worth it for me to love myself no matter what? Am I willing? Am I willing? Because sometimes you're not, because you really believe that you got to punish yourself for some reason, because we were taught that. I mean, let's face it, Brooke, we have systemic guilt going on, starting back from Adam and Eve and whatever else. And I'm not a history person, and I don't do all the myths, and I don't dive deep into that big history well. But let's just look at the unworthiness thing that all humans are under. Like, we can't measure up to anything. So let's just say, assume that we're all in the same boat where nobody's good enough. I can never do it right, and I'm always wrong. All right. So yeah, we're all there as humans. Great.
That's a great baseline, by the way.
There we are. So that's how we're starting. And so here I am now trying to figure out how to love myself no matter what. Here I am trying to figure out what unconditional love is. Let's look at that word, unconditional. That means without condition. Not, I will love myself more if I don't eat the pan of brownies.
Mm.
Now we're conditional. I will love you more if you behave this way. I will love this scenario more if it does it my way. Now we are completely not in unconditional love. So one thing is to get real with your relationship to unconditional love. Are you willing to explore it? Because it may not be what you think it is. So now I'm looking at unconditional love, and am I willing now? Because sometimes I am not. Sometimes I am attached to my story and my righteousness, and I am not willing to let that go. So I'm going to sit there and hold my truth, and I'm going to be this thing on a soapbox, and I'm going to, like, whether it's to myself or others, I'm just going to be on that thing that's so important and is quite conditional. Am I willing to step off that conditional box and love? Let's start with myself, no matter what. So let's just say I ate a whole pan of brownies, and I feel gross because it's a whole pan of brownies. And, the sugar high's over, and I'm going, boo, why did I do that? In those moments when you start to feel, and you start beating oneself up with your self-talk, and also your body's helping you out there because it's not feeling so well, usually, but maybe it's feeling better than you think. Can I say, am I willing to love myself right now? Just ask yourself the question. Am I willing to love myself no matter what? Am I committed to loving myself no matter what?
Yeah. I was also thinking, what do I love about myself? So if I don't love this aspect of, I just did this thing, but I love my arms. I have
Yeah.
such beautiful arms. Look at these.
I would go to my collarbones. I would
Right?
say, I could always look at my collarbones and get a happy feeling. So I'd go to my collarbones,
There,
or
there
wherever,
it is.
yeah, whatever it
Yeah.
takes.
Right. Yeah.
And then also switch if one can, because in the moment of, like, really negative self-talk and judgment about what your behavior was, what a person's behavior was, can I take that moment and appreciate my body, the thing that I'm hating the most, to say, thank you for digesting all these brownies, or whatever it is, the thing. Thank you for being there for me as I go through this life. That's a good prayer. To me, that's a prayer I use all the time. Thanks for being here as I am here mucking it out, figuring out what planet Earth's all about.
Figuring that exactly.
I'm
My
just,
perfect
mucking
introduction.
around like everybody else here in the dirt and in the sky and the water and all of it. So
Yeah, yeah. And I would go, thank you for knowing how to make the brownies. Oh, good self. You
good
had a great
self.
recipe.
I know I've got a really good one, by the way, but
Oh, I do too. We could share.
yeah.
On to Dharma. So let's
Yes.
unpack this term that's discussed in spiritual traditions. It carries a lot of charge for some people, it carries a lot of meaning for those who have been walking and dissecting what the Dharma, what it's all about. And so I would just love to have you explain, what is your understanding of Dharma and how has it evolved over the years?
Dharma, and I can really understand why there would be those that have a resistance to Dharma. Because a lot of the times the way it's presented, I resist it. It's like, You have to know what your life's purpose is. Well, see, we're going back to that unworthiness thing, and you can't get it right and you just don't know anything. How would you not know what your life's purpose is? How would you not know that? I mean, how would you, living here on this life, being an aspect of the divinity, not at some level know what your life's purpose is? So it's not this big mystical thing.
Yeah.
It's
It's
already
normal.
inherent.
Exactly.
And okay, so now I'm going, oh, well, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? Which is implying that I'm not doing enough right now. Now
Mm.
you're going into feminine, masculine ways of being, and but then I don't like to go there all the time because I don't like to make it into that duality. But
Yeah.
that idea of I'm not doing enough, wherever that ranges on the spectrum of ideologies.
Mm.
But what if you're doing enough just now, and maybe you are? What if you assume you are living your dharma?
Mm.
And it's what you're doing is absolutely enough. Abso-freaking-lutely enough. How would that feel? Scary,
Mm.
because now I have to love myself no matter what. Oh, whoops.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Or find the pleasure in it, or learn how to not be judgmental around it, right? Coming back to your pillars of judgment or non-judgment and
Non-judgment.
self-love. Yeah, which I know when we unpack Dharma, it's like, yeah, you may be living it, but are you also receiving pleasure? Are you also receiving support? And maybe it's just like these little nuances that then can have you fully and completely accept that you are in your Dharma.
So Dharma, for those Dharma resistors, and I'm thinking, yay, good. So lighten up. Lighten up on your need to know. That's also a very masculine thing that we need to know. We need to have the story. We need to have the explanation. We need this knowing thing. And do we? I mean, sometimes we don't really need to know. I mean, I'm kind of like need to know basis. Maybe I don't really need to know so much. What does knowing get me? Oh, you know what gets me? Then I feel like I'm better than someone. It gives me a little higher, it gives me a little hierarchy, gives me a little superiority because I know a little more than you. So I know and you don't know. So now I'm one up really subtly. So now I'm playing the one up game because I know. Because we already know, capital K know, our Dharma. So your Dharma resistors, yeah, go out there and you don't necessarily need to know what your Dharma is or what your Dharma code is, even though for some that can be a really supportive practice to have like a phrase of something that will bring you back to yourself. So if a phrase or a Dharma code or affirmation or just a pithy statement that you love and doesn't matter what it is, brings you back to yourself and helps you shine a light within yourself to yourself.
Yeah, there it
Use
is.
that as your dharma. Use
That's
that
it.
as your code. And because another people get confused with dharma as being, what's my job? Well, of course your job is your dharma, but it's not like my profession.
Mm.
And you can do anything and your dharma comes through no matter what you do.
Mm.
You don't have to like have your actual physical money making thing doesn't have to be aligned with your dharma because you're already aligned with your dharma. Now, granted, we do evolve and we do change and we do grow. So if you're feeling like uncomfortable, you've kind of outgrown the set of clothes you're wearing. So it's time to get a new wardrobe.
Yeah.
So now it's time to like change your job or change where you live or change your relationship or whatever, change your relationship to yourself. All these places where we're uncomfortable just says, I've outgrown myself.
Mm.
Well, yay, it means you're growing.
Mm.
So going back to Dharma, clearly I'm just avoiding the situation, aren't I? The topic.
I love it. No, and I was thinking just to like cap that one is it's knowing yourself, right? Dharma is
Yeah.
knowing yourself. It's not necessarily, orienting for an action, but instead it's knowing your own authenticity so that whatever action you do, you are remaining in your authenticity. And even if that authenticity is shedding into the next layer of yourself. So that is what I see when we are living adharmically is when we are going against our deeper truths, when we are not loving or treating ourselves kindly or nature, for example. And yet we know inherently that that's not how we want to be acting, thinking, feeling, and whatever. That is adharmic. But some people actually come in and they're meant to be assholes. They're meant to stir things up and to put a fork in life and to make things a little harder, and if they know that that's them and that makes them happy, it doesn't mean that it's really beneficial to everyone around, but it keeps life pulsing, right? We live in that dual world, so we need to have that duality until we can, if ever, ascend into oneness on this plane. But
Well, we are dual, so we will just embrace duality. And I would challenge the Dharma A-Dharma a little bit with the non-judgment teaching, in
yeah.
that who's to say what is dharmic or adharmic? Is that
Mm,
my decision? Is that because I have a frame of what dharmic living looks like to me?
mm,
And then does that apply for everybody? And I would just say the answer is no, it wouldn't apply to everybody.
right,
Because
right.
who am I to say what your dharma is? Even though I don't really love the way this person behaves, doesn't mean they're adharmic. I mean, I
Right.
don't have to like it, but I think everything is dharmic. I think
Yeah.
just by definition, there's nothing that is adharmic. And we can be going, and that tapas, that rub, doesn't have
Mm,
to be adharmic, because if I need to like do it that way again because it's going to rub more on me, it's those series of choices that don't feel good that rub me into that next level of shine.
So
So
even
I'm
if
in.
it's sickness, you rub too hard, too much in the wrong way for the long amount of time, then all of a sudden you get sick. So you're saying that's dharma too.
Yeah, because it's waking you up. If you want to be woken up, if
Yeah.
your unit, if your being wants to be woken up, it's going to get as sick as it needs to get for you to figure it out.
See, I
Because,
see this just slightly different. I'm going to challenge your challenge
well, let's do
because
it.
I see it as burning karma, serving dharma. So when we're not living dharmically and we're continuing to go against the grain of what might be maybe homeostasis, that shifting dynamic version of homeostasis in the body, and we ignore, that living adharmically is kind of karma, like your actions, and then having to reap your karma. But one of the phrases, we have these divine downloads that just came to me one time was like serve dharma, burn karma. And so when we're doing one, it's when we're doing one, it naturally affects the other. And so that we're not going backwards, digging ourselves in holes, being you know um involuting instead of evoluting. So yeah.
I see
So
what you're saying. And I mean, the thing about it is we can look at things from so many different levels,
absolutely
so we can go, and that's more of a dual level, which is totally, it's
great.
important to have it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. And then I would say a place maybe that lives between this non-dual versus the dual, because we need to talk about duality because we're here living in duality. So I'm not saying it's it's not worth talking about, and it's also super useful. I love what you said, live dharma, burn karma, great. Serve dharma. But there's a thing where there's that place where even I forgot what I was going to say.
um in between, when we're moving from like duality to oneness, and I think that like something in between it just living dharmically or adharmically, there feels to be maybe in that oneness. What I was feeling from you is like when we get to this level of maybe less dual, it's all dharmic, because the greater scheme of everything is that great plan, is the divine download that we aren't always woken up to, but it eventually gets us to where we're going. Is that what you're
Yes. Well, yes, and thanks for saying that again, because now I remember the
okay?
piece for me was that I wanted to bring up, because you talked about non-judgment,
Yeah,
is, to me, the way we burn karma is to not judge things.
I love that.
So if we really want to burn karma, we just stop judging,
I really love
because it's the judgment that creates the karma.
that. Mm.
Whether I'm judging my sickness or your being or my being, if I'm judging something, if I'm judging my behavior, I'm creating a karma. If I'm
Mm.
not judging it and witnessing it, we use that word witness, yeah? then I'm in neutral. And now I can just let things be their dharma. I can let things be what the divine put out there, because the divine is infinite and it wanted all experiences of duality, which means even the ones that I don't like, that I personally don't like.
Mm.
That's my personality not liking it, not because it's, because if the divine, I look at it like the divine is up there with the big experiment. Because, okay, we've got, Samkhya philosophy, we've got Brahma, and then it splits into Prakriti and Purusha. And then it's like, because in wholeness, it's going like, hey, let's try duality on. All right. And it tells itself, all right, awesome. And so it splits, and it's okay, we got this thing, we got this thing. So now let's see what dual does. So now here's the divine, master duality in the kitchen of duality, putting all of us and all the things, like whether it's my cup or you or me or a plant or whatever, in a little test tube, saying, if I put this little recipe, what's going to happen? If I put this little recipe, what's going to happen? If I'm going to put this little recipe, what's going to happen? And so now we're basically living in this amazing restaurant, kitchen, test tube, laboratory of all these possibilities of what can happen in duality. The divine wants to see all of itself, not just parts of itself.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
So the karma for me is burned when we stop judging and let it be divine, because it
Yeah.
is. I'm the only thing that makes it not divine. I am the only thing that makes anything greater than or less than.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
Nothing is inherently greater than or less than. I
Yeah.
decide.
Yeah. That's powerful and beautiful. And then I think about, and then when you put a bunch of other people in that soup pot and all of them thinking the same thing, it's like, that's that, how to navigate that.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good segue into my next question too, which is this idea of resistance and the path of rebellion, right? So also, again, seeing things, stretching them to different perspectives and looking at them through all different lenses is part of the power of the sage, like becoming the sage. And so with such a long and dedicated practice now, what was it, sixth grade, you said? Gene, that's incredible.
Eighth grade.
Eighth grade. Oh my goodness, middle school. Have you ever encountered a resistance to yoga itself or to certain practices in the yogic tradition, or even to like the tradition? I know we're part of the Himalayan tradition of sages. So if so, how did you navigate this? How did it feel? What did it teach you?
Oh, yes, of course. I definitely resisted. I resisted becoming a yoga teacher. I just didn't want to, I didn't even think I was going to become a yoga teacher. At some point, I did a lot of the other things that I wanted to do. But at some point, I followed the money, and I just made more money teaching yoga than being a singer. So that happened, for example, or being an actor or being a whatever else. So I guess the universe said, you're going to do this, and I didn't make a ton of money, but I made something. So, not that that matters, but I followed that. And then I realized then people were starting to call me a yoga teacher, and they kept identifying me as a yogini or a yogi. And I just resisted that because I didn't identify in that way. I identified myself as, for lack of a better term, a child of God, or the divinity, or this thing that is bigger than a subset
Mm.
of the wholeness.
Mm.
So I figured, well, okay, now here I am in this world. And so I better learn the language of yoga. So I did. Became fluent in yoga. And then I also needed to reframe yoga for myself, because I just couldn't sit there living this lie. So for me, I went back to one definition, and this is such a remedial and probably for a Sanskrit scholar, just maybe cringeworthy even, I don't know, because I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, but the idea of union, because we throw these terms out like we know something. We know nothing. We haven't studied it. It's like, okay, great. So I'm going to go with union, because that worked for me back then, knowing that I knew nothing. But I could go with union because it had unity, and I could go with union because it meant wholeness and connection. So I could go with, and then union for me would be everything. So I broadened the term to serve my needs. So yoga would be life. So I could now equate yoga to life. So now I can be a yoga teacher because I'm a life teacher.
Oh, I love that.
So that's
Mm.
how I got around that. And then as traditions, because inevitably they just get dogmatic and they take a side somewhere and they make a right and wrong somewhere. And I don't love that. And at some point it would fall short of what I wanted from a teaching or a tradition. So I would take what felt right to me, look at my resistance to what was being presented when I would go, ew, and then see, was that ooh because it was teaching because of me? Like, what was I a judgment, or just did it? So I gave it always, I tried it on numerous times before I would say, no, that doesn't work for me. Because again, I don't know anything. So I went in and so my practice would be to, if it feels funny, to definitely do my homework and say, okay, what about this doesn't resonate?
Mm.
What is my challenge to that? What question do I really have? Instead of just resisting and,
Yeah.
fighting it. And then at some
Mm.
point being okay with it if I just said, that's really not for me. And I still have that I'm 65 now, and I still have those questions that come up, not and reevaluating traditions and teachings, and I just keep going and just checking in with checking with myself, and also knowing that at some point I'm choosing what I'm open to,
Mm.
and
Mm.
maybe I'm not open to everything, and
Mm.
maybe that's okay because that's where I am right now.
Mm. I love this. I have to pause because I have lots of reflections and I don't want to lose them just yet. But to go back to unity and the yoking, right? And I love, yes, Sanskrit is like a flowering of so many possibilities. So to isolate it into one little word, right, can feel very limiting. But I love that you just jumped on into unity and how it evolved into life and how you're a teacher of life. And I would say, as a witness to who you are and your work. And I have many of our colleagues were your students. So I understand this to be so true. Yes, you are a very powerful teacher for life. So thank you for all of your guidance that you have given to so many people in this world. And now they're spitting genisms, right? So we have a lot of like flowers that are blossoming everywhere. But what the takeaway I have from this is I just came back from visiting the first person I ever found yoga with. Her name is Leah Lyon, and she lives in LA. And we've lived together here in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm from California, born and partially raised. My dad's still out there. So we both feel like we've been dislocated. We're in the wrong places. And so I went to visit her just to be like, soul sister, let's get some medicine together. And one of the things that we shared, which just started to blossom out, was that we never intended to be yoga teachers. And that's our lives. We're both yoga teachers. And I still resist it. I never say I'm a yoga teacher. Never. I say yoga therapist. I'll say I'm a director of a school called the Wild Temple. Yeah, I teach yoga and herbs, but I just like throw that in like this casual thing. When in truth, like that's been my vocation since 2009. I have dedicated my every waking, breathing moment practically to understanding the language and the body and the philosophies and the formulas for getting people from one stage to the next. And I find it interesting that we have that resistance, and it probably could be partially because it's such a vast, beautiful tradition. And it's hard to say this is what I do, especially when there's also a lot of judgment from the world around this. But I loved how you said I had to reframe it so I wasn't lying to myself, or how you worded it somewhat similarly. And I would share this with you. In my own experience, I have experienced yoga to be so beneficial, like a lifeline in my life. And I've tried to recreate situations that give people a lifeline, but to me, to claim that I'm teaching this and I know it, like I'm a master of it, just feels not correct. Like those words I can't say. I'm your guide, I'll be a mentor, I'll give you tools and skills and a methodology, but yoga teacher, I don't know. And I think when you were sharing, one of the reasons why comes back to this union. And in this whole 25 years of my personal yogic dharmic path is coming back to what is that absolute first essence or building block that made me fall in love with yoga. And it's really this, like when you are just sitting in samavriti, right? So you're breathing even waves of breath. And then you decide, I'm going to connect that inhale to lifting my arm and my exhale to lowering my arm. And not only am I just going to intellectually do that, but I'm going to feel all the cells of my arm breathing and then all the cells of my arm releasing the breath. And to me, it's very much innate. I naturally go into this union, in this yoking of I become a prani. My mind is dissolved in prana. All that's dissolved in the body, and I find bliss there. So that's what I found when I first stepped into yoga. And that's what I want to recreate for people is like, we are bliss, right? We have this like amazing tool. And it doesn't have to be really like out of the box, extraordinary, totally expensive, got to fit it into your life. And it takes all this time. It's literally just be in your body and breathe. And so that claiming teacher and reframing yoga for me has been to understand I'm not selling snake oil. Like there's really some good juju here. And yeah, and so then how to share it. So I love your perspective on that, Jean, and also that I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that you also had that as a resistance. So that piece, I just wanted to share that part. I don't know if you have any comments on that, but I have one more piece to share as a
Great.
reflection. No.
No, thank you.
Yeah. The other piece was when you have a pillar being non-judgment, when you have situations such as a tradition that maybe there are aspects of the tradition or a certain decade that there's a framework around the language of what yoga is about and the wellness community shows its ass, for example, or whatever it might be. And you're like, kind of rubs me wrong way. And yet what I loved about first of all, this term judgment, it's very negative. And when I was in midwifery school, one of the questions that she asked us that has sat with me to this day, because I really was totally befuddled when she asked it, was what is the difference between judgment and discernment? And so discernment to me is the path of the sage. It is the definition of sage, right? When we talk about Vijnanamaya Kosha, if we're looking through the lens of the koshas, the Vedic sciences, that buddhi, where bodhisattva comes from a level of discernment that allows us to really tap into higher intelligence. And that's not just our unique individual physical body makeup of brain cells, it's like tapping in. So I'm just curious with this being a large dedication and when you have these moments of, all right, am I judgmental or am I being discerning? What I heard is you ask questions. You ask questions of yourself to get there. So I just want to tease that out. How do you delineate between the two?
Well, I don't really think like that.
Probably
I
not.
don't,
Yeah.
that's not one of my questions, is just
Yeah.
to go from judgment to discernment, but it's an awesome question. What I do is I look to my emotional body, which has been loud in my, so I'm basically using low hanging fruit again, because let's face it, I'm a little lazy. So, whatever's right
And
there.
you're only 5 feet tall, right? I'm just kidding.
So low hanging fruit is the easy fruit. So I'm going to go with that. If I have to get a ladder out, maybe somebody else, tall tribe, come on in. So, um, I, I look to like the pointers in my body and my physical body, my emotional body, my mental body. I look to my pointers of like, where am I rubbing and I don't like it for myself? Not like, and it's taken years and decades and practices and study and blah, blah, blah. It's taken up till now And I don't know, it starts, it starts to happen when it starts to happen, and it's been happening. But now I can articulate it in this particular way for this moment in time, is that when I start to look at something outside of myself and I don't like it, and I feel uncomfortable, I start to notice I know myself well enough to know that when I get snippy or sarcastic, I go, there's something that I'm not looking at in myself. And it will usually be traced back to a judgment of self or other, a place where I don't feel safe in saying what I want to say for real, or I don't know what I really want to ask, or I don't know what I really want to say. A lot lately, things like fear have been coming up. And I've been really unpacking fear in a big way. And I realized that fear to me it's based on a judgment. So underneath fear isn't like courage and all that stuff. Because no, I can't go from fear to courage. If I'm afraid, I'm afraid. There's no courage in that. What is that? So, but for me, it's like really unpacking the judgment underneath the fear. Like, what am I judging that's the seed of my fear? So I look at that, and there was one other aspect, fear and also anger. Well, maybe not anger. I'm just going to go with fear right now, but there was one more emotion. I go to my emotions basically, and the ones that I don't like the way I'm feeling, or I'm feeling unclear or something, or the way I feel in my body, or something's yeah. And as soon as I start to want to take it out on somebody, or blame somebody, or withdraw, and cover up and pretend it doesn't exist, or numb myself, I know that there's a judgment in there. And for me, it's how do I get to the judgment? And that's years and years of practicing non-judgment to be able to go there. So I'm not saying that's an easy practice. It may not be when one leaps to. I would start out with just judgment 101 at this point, and there's no hierarchy, but just like, just stop judging the big things right now. Like, just notice your big flaming judgments. But this is how I get to those other levels of discernment, as you said, because I know that as beings in duality, we're judging all the time or discerning all the time. Judgment would be without an emotional charge. Judgment would be without attachment, fear and attachment. That was it. Thank you. Fear and attachment. If there's an attachment, there's a judgment. If there's a fear, there's a judgment. This is some of the work I've been actually really unpacking with myself for the last 6 months intensively. And so this is sort of my current thing that I'm doing right now. And it's really working out for me really well. So yay. But if there's an attachment or a fear, there's a judgment underneath it. And so when I'm feeling afraid or attached, I try to get to the root of that. The judgment comes from when I'm making something right or wrong. When I'm making it right universally or wrong universally, that's a judgment. Discernment is when I can see the two sides and look at them as neutral. Like, oh, that's hot and that's cold. Not hot is good, cold is bad. Or anger is bad and joy is good. Or violence is bad and peace is good. I mean, violence is only in one's mind. Peace is only in one's mind. There's no empirical state of what peace is. Peace, there's no such thing as, I saw a sign when I was walking the other day, like, my prayer is peace everywhere on earth. I'm thinking like, well, there's already peace on earth unless you don't think there is. Because the only one that's deciding it's peaceful or not is me. Because if we look in nature, there's really nothing peaceful about maintaining homeostasis. I mean, it's a constant thing of things going in, figuring it out, going out. There's nothing peaceful about nature. I mean, and there's nothing peaceful inside of our body as far as cell processes. And so peace is a state we hold in here. And to me, peace would be a state of being in non-judgment.
You just brought me to another level of understanding Shiva, right? So Shiva is like the destructor, the destroyer, but is the one in meditation and peaceful. Shiva meaning peace.
Yes.
Right? That's beautiful, Jean.
So how can I
I also just what was speaking up so loudly with me, with your listening to your body and your emotions, and the undertone being, if there is a judgment, there's a fear or an attachment. How beautiful it is that you've gotten to this place to even be able to feel comfortable enough to listen to the body, to allow the body to be the compass. So it's almost like the methodology would be self-love to then reach non-judgment. Yeah. And that's
And they work
beautiful.
together, it's like there's not like it doesn't go in an order.
Yeah.
You pick what's working, you pick what you can in the moment. And there's also offspring teachings from all of this, of course. And um, yeah, that was so the like in my world of how I've learned and who's taught me and how it's gone through my lenses and my experience, and now it's how I spew it out. There's all these offshoot ways of breaking it down. I know you were going to talk about HerFestival a little bit, so I'm just going to bring in Matangi, and we talk about a little bit about the deities and how they're just to me little offshoots. They're just pieces, fragments, if you will, of the divine. It's an aspect of the divine. Just like we have all these aspects of non-judgment, we have these aspects of self-love, we have these aspects so we can take a little digestible bite off that massive meal of divine or that massive meal of judgment or non-judgment. So what little offshoot teaching will weave the tapestry, the tantra will weave into the wholeness of my life experience. And you will take, and you, each person, you, Brooke, but also you, everybody else, and everything will take your own fibers and your own offspring shoots and weave them together for the blanket that's going to hold you. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
what you want to snuggle up with. That's going to be the thing that holds you. And that's where your safety is, knowing that you're holding yourself in your own creation of your life. You're holding yourself in your tapestry, your tantric life. And so Tantra is everything. You don't have to be a tantric to be doing Tantra because you can't be not doing it.
Exactly.
I mean, you can call it something else. You don't
Yeah.
you don't have to call it Tantra. There's a whole bunch of other ideologies out there that have different language for this. This is not the tantrics don't own this language. I mean, this is not like some word. It's a state. Like peace is a state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very whole. And this brings me to the next question too. And I know we just have a few more questions just to wrap up in this good time frame, where you were just speaking with like this weaving in of all of you, and all of what just makes you you, and that guidance and that force and that beingness, to me is the word that keeps coming right now, because as we record this, it's March 2025. We're in a very interesting time, especially in the United States right now, but really worldwide, where there's a lot of constriction and sociopolitical heat that is smothering our ability to feel free, our ability to grow and evolve in the ways that we want, with education and bridging science and spirit, and an equality of all shapes, cultures, and sizes and genders. And so there's a heightened state of fear and constriction and attachment and all of these things that can create those judgments and feeling small and incapable and disempowered. And so from what you just shared, and the question that I have for you, Jean, is what practice or what perspective or lens could you offer practitioners or even aspiring practitioners to look through for helping them anchor during these times? And my thought with what you just said is what keeps coming is really stay in your wheelhouse, and whatever that means for you, but like do you, and then do you real strong. And then thank you for doing you, because when you do you, lawyer over there, I know that tendril of advocating for immigrants' rights is getting taken care of. Or when you do you over there, dear wonderful person who knows and loves to cook and is bringing people food to the elder community, whatever it might be, you doing you, I know we're upholding this community in these ways. And how I do me is, how can we calm the nervous system? How can we down regulate this whole intensity through the practices of yoga and herbs? And so I do me. But yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on this. Like, what could be some good takeaways for practitioners right now?
Well, I love that you do you and just do it really big. Do it full. I mean,
Yeah,
that to me is Dharma. So
that's
going back to
perfect.
that. So
Yeah.
when you're doing you, you're living your Dharma. You're loud and proud and unapologetic as to who you are in that moment, which will change in the next moment. So I can do something blah, and I go, oh, I didn't like that. Well, because I did that big blah, then I know myself a little bit more. And now the next moment, I don't have to be that anymore. So, so again, taking the judgment off are even an evolution of doing you. You don't have to know what even that is. Just keep doing your call to action. What do you feel moved to do? And do that. Because you do it enough times, you're going to go, "Well, that's working for me or it's not."
Mhm.
Because everything's going to have and to do it without judgment will also take the karmic aspect off of it.
Mm.
And if you judge yourself, so you tied some more karma. You would have anyway. So big deal. It's just what we're doing to just lighten up there. So the idea of doing your call to action, whatever that is, let it evolve and change. Figure out where you really feel strongly, because it's going to, as we go into more and more of a pressure cooker, and life becomes more and more of a pressure cooker as we become more aware. So to erase this idea that just because I'm more in the know or enlightened or whatever, that things are going to get easier. Well, who sold that bill of goods? I
Mm.
mean, that's just a lie. Things just happen and you just know more about it. And so you can see bigger. You have the advantage if you choose to see bigger, which means you can hold more space in a non-judgmental way.
Yeah.
And that to me is the work of non-judgment, is to hold more and more and more and more and not judge. So I'm going back to non-judgment, and that doesn't help though when a person's spinning out or freaking out about the state of the affairs, dialing back now to what's happening now in our world. And just to remember that here in the United States, we have lived in a bubble for many years, like 200 some, and we have really kind of taken a lot of what we fought for back in the day, and it was as imperfect as it was when it was laid out. It was the best they could do at the time given the scenario. There were lots of compromises. It totally wasn't perfect. It totally wasn't equality for all. I mean, we know this, but they did better than what was before. So let's give it that.
True that.
So, and then now we've had this thing, and now, because the world outside of this bubble has been having these sociopolitical things happen like pretty much a lot. Now we're
Yeah.
getting to feel what that feels like, because hey, I'm going to go back to people are people.
Mm.
And at some point, people are going to be people, and there's going to be a wave, and we've had a good run. And so that's all the precursor to what practices I use, which may not be for everybody and may not be popular, but pulling back as big as I can. And because I caught myself, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that before I go to my practices, because I caught myself being the person that I was judging. I caught myself radicalizing. I caught myself vilifying the other side. I caught myself running from fear, and I go, I'm them. I was
Mm.
othering in a big way, and I go, I'm them. I am no different from that side which I abhor right now. So I had to
Right.
get really right with myself and say, okay, well, where does that sit in here in my nervous system? It wasn't sitting too well for someone
Mhm.
that practices non-judgment. I was really freaking out inside and in my mind. So it was pulling back, and yes, we can go to, and how do I feel being this afraid? Not good. And going, the other side, the one that I'm vilifying right now, was that afraid.
Mhm.
So they haven't been feeling good for a long time. Now, I'm
Mm.
not making it right or wrong. I'm just going, we're people. And when we feel afraid, things that we can do. And if there's judgment, we're going to lash out. We're going to try to do greater. We're going to lean heavy into duality. We're going to lean heavy into greater than or less than, right and wrong. I'm better than you. My way's the right way.
Mhm. Mhm.
If because we're afraid, we're like freaking.
Yeah.
So for me, that wasn't my option. I just said, I when I go, oh, I'm not gonna. What do I do now? Pulling up levels and go, okay, it's all divine. What do I know? What do I know? What do I know? It's all divine. It is all divine. Remember the test tube thing?
Mhm.
This is
Yeah.
part of that experiment.
Mhm.
So I can either resist it, which could probably be very uncomfortable, and I can be very happy, and my nervous system will probably have a heyday in there, freaking out,
Mhm.
or I can accept this is what it is right now. This is what is, and this is divine. Thy will be done, going back to that sort of how I was raised. But that I felt some peace there, knowing that it within my overarching practice of thy will be done, I can still do my call to action. I can still do my big me.
Mhm.
But I know right now for me to try to change the other,
Mhm.
that isn't my call to action. And there will be people out there that will be called to try to change the other because just like you said, that's this person, this lawyer handled this food worker hand. So there are people that will do that, and I will support that in my own way. But I
Mhm.
know that it's not my work.
Yeah.
But what can I do? Then I lean into what can I do? What do I feel right about doing? And I do those things. So for me, my practice is personally under thy will be done umbrella
Mhm.
is to
Mhm.
speak, to really get to the point where when I'm in a situation and I'm in an environment where I would normally be nice and play nice like I was taught to be, like I was a good girl, is to maybe say something that maybe not be the popular thing to say.
Mhm.
Again, here's the resistance, here's the rebel, right? So this is the sage to say it, but not because I want to change anybody,
Mhm.
to say that sounds racist to me.
Mhm.
Please stop. That's making me feel very uncomfortable. And then people will respond how they respond. Also to know when I feel safe enough to do that and acknowledge it and be okay with my choice to not speak and then figure out, then replay it back in my mind, how next time, what language do I need to have at my beck and call so that when that happens again, because it will, what can I
Mhm.
say? And even if I
Right.
move the needle just a micro,
Mhm.
for me, that's what I can do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And yeah. And again, it's being in your wheelhouse and you having this beautiful domain of understanding like the how consciousness dances in the body, in the mind, in nature, in the world, and all the things, and uplifting and recognizing, okay, well, it's all divine. These aspects feel like really disharmonious in my body right now, and I don't feel like I could do good or justice or whatever it might be to like make anything work on that sphere. But over here, yes, this is what I could do. So again, kind of knowing the wheelhouse. And this brings me into this perfect segue where Jean's wheelhouse, after I've known you for 10 years trying to birth this book, baby. And it's an oracle, Consciousness for Life, and it is beautiful, done with artist Candace Jensen. So yeah, we're gonna have both of them on here for a complete episode devoted to this magic here. But I just know that it was more than 10 years in birthing. I think this is a compilation of all of the wisdom and the downloads that students have received from you, you have received from you being a channel for consciousness. And, and so I would just for now encourage people to, if you need a little extra boost and get some Jean in your life, yeah, to purchase this Consciousness for Life Oracle deck. And again, we'll go into it as to like how powerfully beautiful it all is. But Jean, is there anything you'd like to share? Just like a quick, I know we have just a little talk about Matangi before we hop off, but yeah, would you share? And I'm going to pull a card as you talk.
Okay. So what, share about the deck or share about Montangi or what am I sharing?
Let's just talk about this deck for just a moment.
Okay, the deck.
And this
Um,
being your wheelhouse, and possibly this being a tool, how could this tool support people in these challenging times? How's that for a question?
well, it is a great tool to support people in all of the times, even if you're celebrating your life. But we talked about non-judgment and self-love and how there was offshoot teachings. This is offshoot teachings. So like something's going on in my life, and then you draw a card, which would be
Just show up.
just show up. And then, so like whatever you're thinking about, then the card appears, it just shows up. Excellent. And then you can go to the book and read the little teaching about it. But these are all basically, this is a book that talks about self-love and non-judgment and being the God, the divinity that you are. So it's pretty much taking you back to your what we call your big S self. Don't be afraid of yourself, your big S self. So yes. So, I mean, this is a book of 91, and I had to pare it down from hundreds of isms and teachings. And so, yes, this is an amazing support for if that non-judgment thing is just a really too big of a leap, then maybe don't be afraid of yourself. Or let's see what I would pull here today.
Or is this action a distraction?
Yes, or you are the whole package. So
Yeah. Oh, so good.
anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, so or this one was right underneath it, acknowledge yourself. So these are little I don't know where it goes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
The
go,
artwork is, yeah,
that's
phenomenal.
glasses.
Candid.
Anyway, but so I mean, it's pretty much, it's all of it in a deck. And I mean, it's not all of it because there's always more,
Right.
but it was a beautiful collaboration. It was hard. We'll talk about that. It was its own, it had its own energy. It had its own timing, and it decided what it wanted to be. This was not what I pictured, just like I wasn't picturing being a yoga teacher. This had its own life. And part of it was to, again, for that, going back to thy will be done, whatever you want, deck and book, I'm here to serve that. So how can I be out of the way? How can my picture of what I think is the best thing get out of the way so I can let what this piece of consciousness wants to be? How can I support that? So
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Jean. Thanks for that effort. I know it was a lot of work to bring it into reality. So it's nice to have you in my home. And I know many people
yay.
have you in their
Thanks
homes.
for asking. Yeah.
So let's just close with this consciousness coming into reality in the form of Matangi. So every year we run a festival called HerFestival, and it's a gathering of about 6 tantric facilitators. Jean and I have been year after year. I'm one of the co-founders, along with Stephanie Che Barea, who I just interviewed in the last podcast episode. And we've typically gathered in Maine, in Rangeley, Maine, for the past 5 years, I think. This year we're going to Mexico. And the theme that we're going to be introducing for the next few weeks, and we already started as of last week, is connecting with this energy or deity called Matangi. And I am so in love with this kind of divine energy. I've talked about it in a number of episodes, also one with Chanti Tacarante Perez, and it was composting unwanted parts. And that was also a Matangi talk. So but Jean, I'd love to get your take on this particular divine consciousness coming through.
Well, I loved how you put it at some point, Brooke, about how, she's like that wild self.
Mm.
She's nature, she's raw, she's unapologetic. She breaks a lot of I mean, I'm going to say a lot because I'm living my own little bubble, She breaks this whole what like when I lived in Catholic, of course, all the saints were men and they were white. She is female and black. So she breaks all of that open, and it's like, and she's colorful and messy and breasty and just bejeweled with her parrots and just, the call of just being in nature and just like all of it. And I love that about about Matangi and that aspect of the divine, and again, offshoot teaching of the divine, but to bring that idea of, and it ties into what you were saying about, do you, and so it's basically be you, be the Matangi of you, be loud and proud with who you are, do it how to whatever level you feel safe or you want to do it in that moment. Doing you might be just holding up reading a book, and doing you might be out there with your parrots and your jewels and your naked breasts and your circling, undulating hips and dancing on a table somewhere or something like that. That can
With
be doing
moonlight,
you.
yes.
Yeah, or in broad daylight. Why not? I mean, why always the moonlight? Just, I have boobs whether it's night or day, so I might as well show them if I want to or not. Kind of depends. So I love that we're going to this sort of, I mean, Maine has its own little wildness, but there's something really wild about, I've been to the retreat center that we're going a couple times. In fact, I was there when it was in its most wild. I was there the first 2 years it opened. So it was really wild. I'm sure it's probably different by now, but it's still that beach is wild. You don't get in the water there. You respect her and you just like hang, you're in presence.
Mm,
It's like, to respect your wild self and don't try to tame it, but
mm,
feel good about hanging with it. So we're going to be in that, and the fact that it's going to be all women doing this thing together. Maybe we will take naked walks on the beach because it's pretty private. That could be cool. Hey, let's have
right.
note to
So
self.
healing too.
Yeah,
Note to
but the
self.
idea of like, how can we be in our naked, physical or non-physical, our nakedness, our wild, our unapologetic, our unfettered,
Mm.
untethered, or unless
All
we
makeup, all masks is off.
all of it, and just whatever however we want to express and play with expression. We don't have to know what that even is. Some people, and you said makeup off, and yes, but maybe someone's makeup is no makeup. So maybe someone wants to put a ton makeup on. Let's
That would
play.
be me.
Same. I have lipstick on. Yeah. So we're so similar in that way, Jeff. But it's providing a safe place for us to explore together in community various aspects of wild self, whatever that might look like. We're calling in, our vision is to have as many different stages of life there. To have a wide range of ages and stages of life so we can have this beautiful melting pot and resource of wisdoms from and perspectives from all these decades, and so we can all learn and be with each other in this way. That's my take.
I love that. I love that so much. And I'm hoping, kind of calling in, inviting mother-daughter. So the mother-daughter relationship, often that mother wound is needing healing. And to see one another in their wild is just so profoundly, I don't know, yeah, evolutionary, reclaiming the power of the feminine, healing to the power of the feminine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
wow, what a great conversation. I'm just always, I love talking with you, Jean. And
Ditto.
yeah, I'm feeling to share that we will have coming up this Friday and next Friday. Jean and I, along with Stephanie, will be hosting a Matangi sound calling in. So we're going to call in her vibration with her particular unique sound. And I was listening to Lady Gaga talk yesterday, and she was talking about her sound aesthetic. And I'm like, so I'm going to invite you to Matangi's sound aesthetic on Friday with us, and the next Friday, and possibly at this retreat in Cabo in May. And if not this year, know that we do it every year. And so to stay in touch with myself and Jean and Stephanie and everyone from HerFestival, especially if this particular work calls to you. But before we close, I wanted to ask you, Jean, what is it that you're reading right now? Do you have anything on your bed table, your nightstand, that something, a good takeaway that you could share with others?
Oh, sure. I mean, first of all, I'm only reading novels right now.
Ooh, I love it. Yes, bring it.
I don't read any spiritual book right now because it's like I just don't feel like it. So I'm reading The Gray Wolf. I'm reading Louise Penny's new book.
Oh, I don't know if this
And I,
person.
oh, I love, well, if you don't know Louise Penny, I would start at number one and read them in order. There's like 20 some books. They're delicious little mysteries, and they take place in Quebec. And so there's this whole French food culture, all that also goes with these sort of, I don't know, I just really love the Louise Penny books. So I'm reading her, I just finally in Libby, because I do the online library thing. Finally, my book came through and I'm reading it. And the book that I read right before it, which is also good, let me look it up. It was, I love that you asked that question. It was We Begin at the End. I forget who wrote it, but it was that was a lovely read. We Begin at the End. So I would say that's what I'm reading right now. There's plenty of other delicious books. One of my favorite books was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern.
I love that book.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, I was so sad when that book was over.
And there's not a sequel that I know of.
No, no, I tried her other book and I didn't love it like that one. But now I've been away, so maybe I can go back. But
I had the same experience, but
yeah,
yeah.
well, sophomore book.
Yeah. Okay, so one last question for you, and
Yes.
I hope that you receive this as a gift, being the conduit. If you could sit with your younger self, the version of you who is just beginning this journey of you, what would she be most amazed to learn about who you are today?
What would she be most amazed to learn about who I am today? Interesting question, Brooke. What would my younger self be most amazed? Well, that I love her unconditionally, and I totally appreciate her I totally appreciate her for providing the foundation and being willing to be what she needed to go through in order for me to be who I am right now. Thank you, younger self.
Oh my goodness, Jean. Oof. Thank you so much for being here. Your words of wisdom, your sage guidance. I, of course, want everyone who is listening to go and visit flyingvenus.com. Stay with Jean Mazzei. She has monthly gatherings, all kinds of offerings that come whenever she desires. And she is a gem. So thank you so much for being here, Jean.
Thanks for having me, Brooke. It's been my delight.